Hello and welcome to Connect and Collaborate. I'm Alex Hopkins, your on-air producer. And before we get today's show started, I have a few favors to ask my audience. Please visit cobrt.com. You can sign up for our newsletter. Click on the media tab. You can find past event photos, past event videos, as well as this radio podcast production under that tab. Also, check out our events page while you're there. We have tons of events coming up, so be sure to sign up for those. But I am excited to get today's show started. I am meeting with General Assembly. So this first half, I'm meeting with Adele McCarthy-Beauvais and Nick Anderson of General Assembly. So thank you very much for meeting with me, you guys. I'm excited. This is a neat concept. It was something that I wasn't made aware of right away, but I did some research on you guys. And so you are in the realm of kind of the technical aspect of school, right? So IT.
Yes. We're a vocational school. So we're a global tech education company. We help people transition careers into careers in tech. So focusing on UX design, data science, software engineering. We help people upskill and reskill in digital marketing, product management, data analytics, front-end web development. The list goes on, you name it. Yes, exactly.
Awesome. Well, before we get started in talking more about General Assembly and why people should attend, I want to talk about you guys and your expertise and what brought you to General Assembly in the first place. So I'm going to start here with you, Adele. Tell me about your background, schooling, and ultimately how you got here today.
Sure. So I guess to begin with schooling, I think I may have paid way too much on my my undergraduate and graduate education. I mean, I can't regret any of those decisions. Got me where I am today, but it's what we're doing now with GA and our larger mission kind of makes me ponder some of the decisions I made and makes me wish that a company like GA was around back in the day. So for the last 8 years before coming to General Assembly, I've been working in the K-12 space. So I helped launch 2 charter schools in San Jose, and in various aspects of education reform. So, and from there worked for a foundation that was focused on cutting out bureaucracy in public school systems. And then for the last 5 years have been in an ed tech company servicing the Ohio Department of Education on a teacher effectiveness program. So we helped build a platform to assess teacher effectiveness. Sorry. So anyway, as I was kind of in this space, I kind of started looking around and thinking about more innovative models and really kind of the shortcomings of the traditional systems. And, meanwhile had moved to Colorado 4 years ago and was really getting excited about the various workforce education opportunities here, from Guild Education to 2U to General Assembly, and had the opportunity to join General Assembly as the regional director this past summer. And it's crazy, but I feel like I'm having more impact, and our organization is having more impact in a kind of for-profit education space that's non-traditional and than I was in these kind of larger nonprofit and bureaucratic places that I've found myself in over the last 8 years.
Which is interesting. I know there's kind of a debate on the for-profit versus nonprofit schools when it comes to that, right? It can be a contentious issue. So it's interesting that you say that you're actually feeling like you're getting more out of it. What specifically are you seeing that is making a difference for you personally?
Well, I think, one, GA is a large organization. We've got 20 campuses. We're global. But we in Denver are kind of built like a startup. We're scrappy. We're right next to our students. That's where our staff sits. We know all of our students. We celebrate when they get jobs. There's something very personally satisfying about being in an environment like that, as opposed to working remote and kind of plugging in from a coffee shop and then flying in and meeting with teachers once a month. So that just kind of from a day-to-day perspective is really satisfying to me. But then, I think just the whole model and the concept where you decrease the time and the cost of an educational investment and increase the practicality and the relevance of the skills being taught and acquired is just so transformational. There's, I personally dumped a couple $100,000 into my 2-year graduate degree. And granted, that compounded with student loans over time. And
right.
I am where I am. But I just think about,
and
the
that's
power.
Not unheard of. That's
right.
common. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of money. I like that you're saying decreasing time and thereby decreasing cost.
Well, time and cost.
Right.
I mean, total cost is, for us for a 3-month program is $14,000. And that's coupled with career coaching and support that doesn't just stop at 3 months. It extends until that person finds a job. So there's that investment that we're making in students as well.
That's awesome. That's great to hear. So that you're actually getting something. Your ROI is outstanding then.
Yeah.
Awesome. That's wonderful to hear. Because I know that one thing when I did not take a traditional path by any means. I went to school, back to school, I should say, when I was 30 and got my associates, right? So different path. But I also took 3 years of university and wasted a lot of money, essentially. But when I went back to school, I noticed I broke down every class and divided it by how many days there were. And I was like, I cannot miss today. That is $60 I'm flushing down the toilet, right? So, and education, no matter how you look at it, is an investment. And so if you can get more bang for your buck, let's do that path, right? Yeah. So, Nick, I want to hear about you and how you ended up at GA. And
well, I guess we'll start with the education piece. So I was really bad at high school. I had pretty bad ADD, and I didn't know it through most of my teenage years and into my early 20s. So I failed a lot of classes in high school, kind of barely got over the line, graduated on time. Obviously not awesome grades, so I managed to get into a for-profit art school. And this is kind of where my story with for-profit education begins, because I remember feeling like I was surrounded by classmates who may not be on the same path as me, or it was just kind of confusing. So at the end of my time there, I graduated with a full Flash portfolio, and I was very excited about it. And then the very next year, Flash was killed by iOS. So I remember thinking, I want to make the education system at this particular school, at my alma mater, better, so that no one does that again. So no one graduates with a useless portfolio, because it kind of seems crazy now looking back, like, why did they train me so long in something that then just poof, it was gone.
Right.
So I served on their professional advisory board and tried to help them write better curriculum for that. But the problem with that for-profit model was that by the time that I had lobbied enough to add something to the curriculum, tried to get them to add something we needed, by the time they got it in there, it was deprecated. And I just remember feeling so frustrated that they couldn't stay on top of it. And the primary metrics here was getting people in the door, signing the checks, and then no, there is no second part, just you get them in the door, right? And I did have some great professors there, and I did receive a good education, but it was something I had to work against the system to try to pull out, basically. So I served for a couple more years on their product advisory board, and when I was going to school, there was a student there who had severe mental disabilities, who was struggling with a lot of the classes, but he kept kind of floating along through the classes. 2 years after I graduated, I go back for a portfolio review, and he's still there. And he's getting up and he's presenting. And I was like, he was going to school with me. What's happening? It's like, well, he just fails the last quarter over and over again. His parents keep writing a check. He's been doing his final quarter for 2.5, 3 years. And I was like, when are we going to stop doing this? It's clear that it's not working for him. And they said, well, as long as he's signing the checks, we're going to keep doing it. So they put this panel to me. They're like, well, you guys are going to vote on the portfolios, and the choice is either fail him again, and he'll be back next time, or pass him and give him a bachelor's degree. And I remember just walking out that night and just being like, I can't do this anymore. This is ridiculous. It's not working. It's not student-centric. It's not even a good business model. It doesn't make any sense what we're doing. So from there, I did get an education there in web design and development. I've worked as both a designer and developer for the past 10 years at various startups, agencies, product teams. Most recently, I was a senior consultant for Aetna on the Making an App. And I was at this agency doing a little bit of contracting freelance work, and I didn't really like it. And I went to the Denver Startup Week job fair, and I remember talking to their very first career coach at General Assembly Denver, and they said, yeah, we need teachers. And I was like, oh man, I've always wanted to teach. I've tried writing curriculum in the past. This is something I'd like to do, but I don't have a master's degree, and the pay sucks. Right? And that's basically the story that you get with teachers. And I'm like, I'm doing agency work. I'm probably not going to do that. And I remember talking to them, and they said, well, actually, you don't need a master's degree. You just need experience, and the pay doesn't suck. We're competitive with agencies because we want good talent teaching. So I signed on for a 3-month contract because I wanted to try it. And I remember telling our RD at the time, I'm going to do this for 3 months. If my students don't get a good education, they don't get jobs, I can't do this because I've tried that in the past. I don't want to do that again. So we did that, and my first 3 months of GA, it just kind of clicked where I'm like, this is a way that we could do education completely different. I was not a good test taker, not a good student, and tech moves too fast for the traditional setup to really work. So one of my first weeks teaching, I pulled down our lesson for CSS animations. And I'd been working for pharmaceuticals, making the little molecule animations, and then your brain's happy, for years. And so I knew a lot about CSS animations. So I pulled it down. I'm like, actually, I have a lot more to add to this. So I rewrote a lot of the curriculum. I pushed it back up. It went back up to the global schools. And then now when you start teaching at GA, if you pull down the CSS animations lesson, it's the stuff I wrote. And I was like, wow, it's live curriculum. I can update it today, push it up. It's being looked at by the product team and vetted. You're doing pull requests to pull it back in. And I was like, we're all writing the curriculum all the time right here. It was incredible. Since then, I've been teaching there for 2.5 years. I started teaching the web dev program. I've now moved on to teaching the user experience design program. And I'm the board chair for the product advisory board for the UX curriculum for all the GA schools now. So
congrats.
that's how I got here. Yeah, sorry, it's a little long story.
It's not a long story. It's a perfect amount.
And the great thing is that we have him in Denver, too. He's
Right?
like one of our flagship. Yes, exactly.
That's a great feeling. That is amazing. So first of all, I love that you came from sort of a better taste in your mouth when it comes to for-profit schools, as we mentioned, can be a contentious issue. And not everyone is out for the right reasons.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
And so you found the right reasons at GA, which is awesome to hear. So we want to talk specifically about GA. One of the first things I noticed, so you mentioned the curriculum, right?
Yes.
You're writing that immediately,
Yeah.
and it's going for review. So any professor can do that, first of all. And so how much research, I guess I'll ask you personally, how much research goes into the content for that class? This, as you said, this day in technology, things change constantly. So I you see it one day and then the next day there's commas added, right?
Yeah.
Like, I know how silly that is, but it can make or break a difference, especially when it comes to coding.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about how much research you go into before you push up into the main guys, how to change
product
that.
team.
Yes.
Well, luckily the research is constant. So one of the other things that I really like about the GA style classroom is that it's a more collaborative work-styled environment. So I run my class as an agile stand-up or startup. We basically do stand-ups in the morning. We do retros on Friday.
What are stand-ups and retros?
Sorry.
No
So
worries.
this is agile terminology. So if you work in a tech company or a product team, more than likely they're using an agile methodology for how they run their projects, which means that they're going to do stand-ups in the morning where they talk about what did you do yesterday, what are you working on today, and do you have any blockers?
Meetings.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
We just named them different. Yeah.
I'm with you now.
So daily meetings, and then basically a Friday meeting we do it at 3:30 where we just kind of look at what we did. And then we chunk our projects out into what's called sprints, and those are going to be 1 to 3 weeks, somewhere in there. And you basically have product goals. My students track their times. They turn in timesheets. They are essentially working for me. As I'm mentoring them and teaching them. So the research part happens daily. I go to Startup Sketch to show them, a technique for nesting symbols. I open it up and it says, there's a new sketch update. And I say, great, we're going to go read the change log real quick. And then we put it up on the board and we all read through the change and make sure that we know what's going on. And a lot of times this leads me to doing like live coding sessions or live demos with stuff that I'm not familiar with. But that's the importance of having professors who can teach and develop and design, is that my entire career has been based off of opening my programs in the morning and going, what changed today? Let's see what's going on. Reading news about, like, is the React license going to be renewed? Is MIT going to buy it? Things like that. That's just our daily life. And so I can come in already having read the tweets from Design Twitter and read the changelog notes and the latest updates, and then teach that to my class. They also teach me a lot of stuff too. So I was showing some of my students some interaction design principles, and one of the students was just like, I have a motion graphics background. I found this thing. It's really good. And I'm like, cool. Teach me in the class about it. And we kind of go from there. So we just it's basically just note-taking and adding it all in and then making sort of daily, weekly, monthly updates to the product team so they know what's happening on the ground.
Amazing. I love hearing this because you took the next question right away from me. How much feedback do you get from your students?
A lot.
And incorporate that, right? Exactly,
Yeah.
because they're doing their own research too. I'm loving this trend throughout the education system, whether you're talking about pre-K or post-grad, right? We're moving on to this trend of like, you can Google anything, right? So incorporating that into traditional courses has proven a little bit tough for a lot of places, right? Like, I have a calculator constantly everywhere I go.
Yeah.
So I don't really need to memorize the multiplication table anymore, right? It's ideal. You should. But that being said, when you're looking at this particularly tech industry, you have to be on top of it. You have to be on the ball, and it can change in a day. And so that's exciting to see that General Assembly stays on top of it, and they have people that are clearly doing the research and continuing that and continuing to educate yourself while on the job.
Yeah.
And it's an afforded opportunity that's different for a lot of professors. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We also have this other model. So Nick is a, distinguished professor, instructor.
Hey, you can use that. That's fine. Not technically a professor.
Owns his class and is the kind of leader of that classroom, and that's the UX design class. And then we have two other immersive programs that are data science and software engineering. And we have a very interesting model there where we have best-in-class instructors who are kind of beamed in. They're on big screens speaking to the students, and the students have a broader network where they're taking the class alongside students in Austin and Chicago and LA. And so they're making those connections, both, across region, but then they're also able to get really like the best instructors in the country, no matter where they are. They still have to show up every day, and that instruction is still supplemented by very strong classroom instruction by our local instructor, who our current software engineering instructor was a Russian literature master's and is just extremely passionate about teaching, but he also knows how to code and is, sometimes the students just want more of him, rather than the best instructor that we can find in the company. So it's really nice to get that personal interaction, personal touch with the kind of broader global network. So those are our two other immersive models.
Those are really exciting. I know that you had a little bit of a brag before we got on air here about Denver specifically in the GA world. Kind of at the top of your game, right?
I think we're doing pretty good.
We're doing well.
Yeah.
Oh, stop being so humble. Come on, give me the tea here.
We're growing very quickly, but we have quality is at the kind of center of our focus as we think about adding more immersive classes. So, we're always looking for feedback from students. So we survey students the beginning, middle, maybe twice in the middle, and then at the end of course, and then they fill out exit tickets every week.
I would say
every day.
Yeah, every week they fill out an exit. Every week is an exit ticket about their general experience, where we collect NPS. And then there's
Net
an official
score
Net Promoter
for those
Score.
who aren't with the lingo there.
0 to 10 scale. How are you feeling? And then we do an official one that gets tallied into our campus's scores mid-course, at the last day of the course, and then 90 days out, and then 180 days out. So unlike the model that I had come from my college, where the only metric being measured was how many people were signing checks, we have people that are watching how many people come in, how many have a good time in my class, graduate with skills, how many are placed 90 days out, how many are placed 180 days out, and that is the overall health metric of the campus.
And by placed, we mean finds a job within their field of study.
Within their field of study.
Not just like they become a barista again or whatever.
Don't go back to Starbucks. You
gotta
gotta
become a UX designer or a product owner or what have you. I think the other piece is that by collecting that feedback and really being focused on it, we can iterate mid-course.
Yeah.
So students give voice to they want more of Sketch or want more of Adobe. You can invest in that. We've heard people say, well, I need a little more help. I don't feel like I'm getting enough personalized attention. Okay, 2 days later, we've got 2 more TAs that are in class all day with these folks. Like, we want to make sure that we take their investments in us very seriously, and we want to make sure we're delivering on that promise, because we know it's a big risk still to be in this non-traditional educational environment, and 3 months seems kind of crazy to transition careers, and yet we're seeing it happen all the time, but we still really feel their anxiety and want to make sure that we are, accountable to it and accountable to the investment they made with us.
Which is more than I can say from my college experience, right? Exactly. There's so many great things that General Assembly does that are non-traditional. And of course, you cater to non-traditional students. As you mentioned, you have a lot of people that come to you that are transitioning careers, right? So typically somebody that's already established their career, and then they're looking for maybe some coding, maybe some XD design, right? Clearly, I'm up on the lingo. I know it. I'm sorry about that. But yeah, so typically somebody like myself who's maybe looking to transition or just add skills to what I already have. But you also have some place here for students that are just graduating high school and looking to,
absolutely.
Right? So it's not just the non-traditional. You have a very non-traditional curriculum, but you have place for traditional students, those 18, 19-year-olds that are entering. I want to talk before we go to break, because I'm going to bring in some real-time stories and see some of your graduates and how it works in real life, right?
Yeah.
If you're actually telling me the truth here. But I want to hear about these boot camps that you offer. So if you don't mind telling me a little bit about that, maybe we can get some people signed up on the break.
Oh, okay. Well, the boot camps are really what we were just talking about, though, like immersive programs that are 3 month engagements.
Yeah.
We do have weekend boot camps that
we have 1 weeks. We have part-time after work. So if you want to, we kind of break it down into like immersive is a 180. So you can come in having just been a barista. I have students who their last job was like at Jamba Juice, and they come in and they leave as a junior level designer, right? If you do a part-time course, that's more of like a 90 degree. So let's say you are working in design and you want to learn a little bit about development. You can take the front-end part-time course to get the skills there, so you can pivot your career more towards like a UX engineer, someone who can do some front-end code and design, right? And then if you are someone who is coming in with skills, for instance, I had someone in my last cohort who had 10 years of research experience, just not design research, and someone who came in as a graphic designer, but they hadn't been doing the actual like business decisions, just like they asked me to make a poster with a turtle on it, I draw them a poster with a turtle on it. They want to actually do like the research part and understand user segments and stuff like that. Those people go on to graduate and then get higher level jobs. I had someone who came in with a really extensive writing background, and a week before graduation, she got a job at Ibotta as a senior content strategist. So it doesn't just have to be a pivot into junior level roles. It's an upskilling, and it's really whatever you bring in, we're going to build that up even further and send you whatever direction is going to make sense.
I think also our part-time classes kind of distinguish us from our competitors, at least here in Denver, in that we offer kind of a broader range of subject areas, but also we see employers sponsoring their employees to upskill. So, we have our digital marketing class, and, I would say half of our part-time students are sponsored by their employers, which is impressive, but I think also kind of expected, for employers to really be making that investment back into their workforce. And it's kind of better for everyone. So
yeah, that's a whole show on its own, by the way, because
exactly.
I strongly stand by that. We are going to go to break, but before we do, where can we find more information?
You can go to www.ga.co. And we have, plenty of places to plug in. Our evening events, we have several evening events, intro twos, deeper dives into various classes and workshops. So there's a way to kind of sample and see if you're even interested in delving further into the subject matter for free on our campus any night of the week, basically.
Awesome. That is lovely to hear. So when we come back, we're going to hear from some graduate students and see if this is really all they say it is, which I have a feeling it is. So thank you so very much. Be sure to like and subscribe our YouTube page while you're here. Find this podcast more at cobrt.com/radio-podcast. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Connect and Collaborate. Once again, I'm Alex Hopkins, your on-air producer, and I am talking with some graduates of General Assembly. So we met Adele and Nick in the last segment, and we were talking about all they have to offer and things like that. And so they were telling me about what a great curriculum they have. And one of the big tenets of General Assembly is to make sure that you get a job in your career field. So I am excited to introduce my 3 alums that are in the room here. We have Bryce Seifert. She is an experienced designer for CBP up in Boulder. Jillian Berger, who is a Transamerica design lead for user experience research, which is a mouthful, but we're going to learn exactly what that entails in a few minutes. And then Chad Keevan, sales partnerships, software designer for them.
Developer,
not designer. There is a distinct difference there.
No, my designing is not good. Ew.
Yes, awesome. So the developer happens before designer?
I guess you don't really have a software designer.
Yeah. I made up a position.
I guess you design the software, and then you develop it.
Yeah. Okay,
whatever
cool.
goes along.
Way to make me feel better.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
It's part of my job, too. Make other people feel good.
See?
Yeah.
We're learning already. So also, just as a side note, Jillian and Chad here are both on the alumni board. And we were talking a little bit off air, which was that you don't just call and hound people for money. And a lot of people,
No.
I had that experience. On my phone, it literally says still in debt when they call me. So, but it's a different experience for you guys. And I feel like you probably get a lot more interaction from your fellow alumni.
Yeah, I mean, the board, it was really put together so that the services that General Assembly offer could continue after someone finishes a program. They could still feel like they're part of that community. We're pretty new in our inception, a couple months old, maybe a year, but we're really trying to identify where we can best serve the alumni community, keep them engaged in the current classes that are happening with the current students, and allow them to feel like the General Assembly experience doesn't end just when you graduate.
Yeah, and I have an interesting tidbit here. 40% of your alums are in some form back on campus, right? Whether that's part of a panel or other activities, right?
Yeah.
Super exciting stuff. Well, Bryce, I want to start here with you and talking about your experience at GA and then how you ended up at CPB.
Yeah, certainly. So I guess it makes sense to start before I actually went to GA, and I was working at an ad agency on the account side. So it was a lot of emails, a lot of scheduling, a lot of project management. And my boss, actually, she's an awesome mentor to me, and she was kind of the one who pushed me to take the program. And I was doing a lot of design work without knowing that it was design work. And so it really just kind of worked well for me to actually go and get a proper education and then continue to transition my career. So I went to GA in, the end of 2017 and finished in early 2018, and then worked at a software company, and then I just actually started at CPB. So it's been kind of a few different twists and turns, but ultimately I knew I wanted to work at an ad agency doing UX, and so that's where I am.
Awesome. So tell me about your experience as far as what kind of programs you signed up for. And so you started at the end of 2017, graduated in 2018. That timeline that you were there, did you do just did you only take classes on weekends? Did you go full time? How did that work out for you?
Yeah, I went full time. So I did the full 10-week UX immersive course, which I think Jillian did as well. And that was just great. You know, it's hard to focus in on one thing if you're really trying to truly transition your career. If you're doing nights and weekends, and those are great to add to your skill set. But for me, I needed that immersive program to get full education under my belt.
Were you working full-time at the same time, or did they allow you to have some break there?
I switched agencies, so I was doing a bit of work for my agency as I kind of tapered off, and then was just full-time at GA.
Cool. So how were the courses? Because I imagine 10 weeks is a really short period of time to hone one skill, let alone multiple skill sets.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and it's funny because I went to the University of Denver that does 10 weeks, so it was actually a format that I was super used to, but it is kind of a different experience in that you're literally learning one thing day in, day out for 10 weeks, and, you know, that has awesome benefits because you're fully immersed, but if, let's say, you don't really love learning one topic, you're kind of stuck in it. So yeah, it's a unique experience, and I had one teacher the whole time, which was awesome, and you're with the same group of people the whole time, so you have some consistencies to kind of get you through.
Oh, that's really cool. Okay, that's not something that I had thought would be offered, but I like that. So you're with one person the whole time, one professor, teacher, instructor the whole time. So I want to talk to you about your experience level when you went in, versus when you came out. So when you went in, you said that you'd started working with some design programs, so you had a little bit of knowledge about what you were doing. Did you feel like you were in over your head when you started?
It's funny, I was literally making wireframes on PowerPoint, so very rudimentary beforehand. And the way the program is set up is so that if you have literally zero skill, you can still do the program, and it still works well if, let's say, you have a really in-depth background in graphic design. It still works well for you, which I thought was obviously really helpful considering I had a tiny bit of background.
Awesome. Well, Jillian, let's talk about you and your transition through school, and ultimately I want to get to why you decided to join the alumni board eventually. But let's start with what brought you to GA in the first place.
Yeah, so like Bryce, I think I should start right before, which was prior to General Assembly, I had kind of not really found my place and not found my people, and had gone to a traditional four-year college, and it felt more like a thing that you just had to do to check the box. It wasn't because I was passionate about it or knew what I wanted to study or what I wanted to become, quote unquote. I just went because it was what was expected of me. And I think I probably spent a huge amount of money and wasted a huge amount of time, both of my own and for other people who really wanted to be there. And so I was working at a charter school and was absolutely miserable, and started working with a career coach. And we spent about 9 months like doing this deep dive into my life and like understanding how I perceived work and career and the things that I needed, and had this whole laundry list of the things I was looking for, the skill set that I had, the compensatory skills that I was been relying on and just weren't really making me happy. And I took all of that, and my career coach kind of at the end of our time together was like, okay, now go out and find careers that you think might fit this. Like, you don't know because you haven't done them, but go try to find some stuff. And I had a friend who had just finished a boot camp course at Galvanize for data science. And he was like, it was amazing. You'd be incredible. You should definitely check it out. And so I started to pursue that path, and that I stumbled across General Assembly in that pursuit and spoke to one of their, I don't know, like admission counselors or whatever, and kind of told this person what I was looking for, what I was hoping my career would look like, the things that I wanted to do. And he was like, you don't want to do data science. You want to do UX. Like, let me tell you about this program. He told me about it. I did my own research. I went to an informational session at GA, and the folks there who were doing the informational session were awesome. I got super jazzed. I applied for the program right away. And thankfully I have like a super supportive partner who was just like, yes, go do this. Like, we'll figure out how to cover you and, make this work. And I think I applied for the program exactly 2 weeks before our start date, found out like 3 days after that I had gotten accepted, needed to hustle together the money, and like showed up on my first day and was like, I'm with my people. Like it was awesome. Yeah, it was great.
Oh, that's so nice when things fall into place and you finally feel you are where you're supposed to be.
Yeah.
Yes. And you mentioned having a supportive partner, and I think that's very important to discuss too, right? You want to make sure that your family, your partners, anybody in your life also supports your journey, because especially when you move from that 4-year degree and you're in a career already, it's really hard to adjust, right? And so you got to make sure you get your people on board. Awesome stuff. I love hearing about that. Was there something that you specifically read about General Assembly that made you decide to go for it, or was it, do you feel like it was just outside pushing you into?
Yeah, I think the understanding that I had about myself after doing the work with my career coach was immensely helpful, because I could start to advocate in a way for the things that I needed and wanted, which I hadn't been able to do before. And I was really clear as I was going through the General Assembly process, the application process, of like, here are my outcomes that I kind of need to have in order for this to work for me. And through that entire process, the folks at General Assembly were really supportive and could answer my questions. They were really honest about the places where they're like, we don't know that we can give that to you, but here are some ways that we might be able to support in a roundabout way. So it wasn't anything particular about things that I'd found about General Assembly. I just found that once I started engaging with them, they were incredibly helpful and supportive, and the informational session really kind of closed the deal for me.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. I love hearing that. I'm going to ask you specifically, and then you guys can chime in as well. Let's talk money, right?
Sure.
Because anytime you're talking education, money is involved, quite clearly. Secondary education, I should say. So we learned in the last segment that the 3-month program is about $14,000, right? Which is typically what you would spend for a 2-year associate's degree. It's a drop in the bucket when we're talking 4-year and master's, right? How much do you feel like you've gotten out of that? How has your return of interest been?
I mean, mine personally has been massive. I'm in a career now with people I love. I get to do work that I'm super passionate about. I get to have a seat at the table. I get to participate in decision making. So all of that to me doesn't even have a dollar value. Like, that's just happiness that I'm trying to bring into my life so that I can do the things I want to do. When it comes down to money, I can tell you that the job that I left in order to do General Assembly was paying me not a terrible salary, but not a great salary. And I, within less than a year of finishing my program and finding my place at Transamerica, have doubled that salary. So
that's awesome.
It's a big deal. It was a big deal for me. It was a big deal for my family. It's huge. Yeah, it's big.
Yeah, it is. It makes a difference. And I love that you said that there's a lot that you've gained that has $0 value. I don't know if you guys agree, but there's one mindset that I've had for a really long time, and it's that particularly millennials, it's my generation, right?
Yeah.
I think we're all in the same generation, but
don't group me in that.
No, okay. Here is more about flexibility. It's about having that work-life balance, right? I would easily trade 2 vacation days for $1 less an hour, right? Like that to me is incalculable. And I love that you too have that passion, right? You're seeking out things that don't have that dollar value. If you invest up front, get a good education, you can in turn get a better position, right? And I one of those things you mentioned, having that decision-making ability, which is awesome. I imagine that all of you have stepped up your game in your career with that as well.
Yeah. They General Assembly provided a lot of outcomes and resources with the resumes, and I can take that for the future, and it's very nice. Like, there's a lot of things that we gained besides just skills, but I mean, learning how to communicate with other people in that area, and then our instructors usually came from that industry, where some universities, they go through the rhythm of things and then get their degree and then they teach. So, but our instructors actually have been in the field, hands-on, and they can tell us, like, okay, like, don't communicate this way, like the do's and don'ts, like, don't be this guy, you want to be this person, like the one that's willing to step up and like comment your code and things like that. So it's very nice.
Yeah, I would imagine that that's pretty incalculable. And we talked a little bit off break when I still had Adele and Nick in here. And one of the things that they wanted to make sure that they do for their students is also encourage life skills, right?
Yes.
This is one thing to learn exactly how to code, one thing to learn exactly how to design or develop software. It's completely different to learn how to make a living and be in your workspace with those skills. So Chad, tell me about your experience, and like Jillian and Bryce, let's start with a little before GA.
Before GA, I was back in Missouri from St. Louis area. Went to University of Missouri, got 28 credit hours, I think. That's where I stand today. After a while of in and out, I decided, okay, let's learn how to code. And I taught myself some, and it got to the point like, okay, I want to just throw myself into this, fire hose it, and I started looking into coding boot camps. And I was living with my partner at the time in St. Louis in September 2017. And she comes home, and I'm like, hey, coding boot camps, it's a thing, 3 months. And she's like, okay, like she wanted me to be out of the apartment more because I'm always like self-teaching myself. And I was like, but the opportunities are in Denver, and I really like startups too. So Denver just made made the most sense, especially with Boulder being right there and the scene. And she's like, okay, let's do it, like look into it. And I looked into it, signed up like within that week, flew out here in October, looked into Denver. We really liked it. People are very nice out here. And
compared to St. Louis, for
yes.
sure.
Yeah, there's some, mostly, that's true. And started the Monday right after Thanksgiving and finished February 28th, and it was a great time and got a lot out of it.
Awesome. How long did it take you from graduation to securing a job?
Graduated February 28th. I didn't really, whenever I started, I'm like, okay, I knew it was going to take at least 3 months to get a job. Like, that's what I read. I did my research, and like, brace yourself. You might be jobless for 3 months after, but it will be well worth it. By the end of the boot camp, though, my program's 12 weeks since it's web development. I was burnt out. I was like, I need a month to like catch up on personal stuff and whatnot. And I applied every once in a while just to still be eligible for outcome support with General Assembly. But a company, they called me. I don't know why they did. And here I am, started April 9th. So it took me less than a month and a half to get a job, and they paid me exactly what I put on my application and things like that, and started April 9th, and here I am a little over a year later with the same company, and they've done very flexible things for me, and I mean, they raise my salary and things like that. So it's pretty nice.
Awesome. Yeah. So I want to ask you specifically, since you moved here from St. Louis, the tech market here in Denver. I hear amazing things about it. I'm clearly not in it. I clearly keep misspeaking about the program. So, yeah. But that being said, I hear that the tech market here in Denver is amazing. Do you have something to compare that to? Were you on that path already in St. Louis, I should ask first?
St. Louis was very up and coming, but they're about like 5-10 years behind. Like Angel List, that's where you go, the website you look for startup jobs. In St. Louis at the time, I think there were like less than 150, maybe less than maybe 50 jobs on there. Denver was like 200 to 300, 400-ish. And the meetups, tech meetups, there's so many more out here in Denver and Boulder. St. Louis, you could maybe find one here and there. And out here, you find one every day of the week for if you want to know a certain web framework or anything like that. It's very nice coming out here. Also, another thing that I liked about coming out here is St. Louis, they're a very traditional city. Denver, they're more up and coming, and I don't have a degree. So I realized, okay, like more job opportunities in tech out here, but also they don't care about the whole bachelor's degree as much. And obviously I got a job less than 2 months after my program, so it's all paid off for me. I'd say that. So.
Which is exciting, right? That's,
yes.
Yeah, that's tough to say. You've been working a year and you're pretty much paid off with your school.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
that's awesome. That's unheard of when you talk about traditional 4-year routes.
yeah.
So Bryce, I want to turn back to you, and I'm going to ask each of you this because you've had different experiences for why you went back to GA. As you mentioned, you already were on a path, you just wanted more skills, so you were upskilling. Any advice to someone who is looking to upskill as far as what should I get in order? Why should I go to GA instead of somewhere else that maybe I've researched?
Yeah, well, and I think that there are different methods you can do it. Like, there are some things that you truly can learn online, or you can teach yourself, like you had started doing. But there are other things that, like, for example, in my current role, I'm constantly applying UX principles to things that traditionally don't get UX work done. And so having a strong foundation is the only reason why I'm able to do it. You got to know the rules before you can break them. And so I think if you want like a holistic view or a true understanding of like the entire UX process, that's probably something that you should go to an immersive for. If you have a role that maybe having some knowledge of UX would be helpful, look into other ways, maybe do a weekend boot camp or a night info session and see how in depth you actually need to go.
Awesome. You completely switched out roles. You wanted something different entirely. So tell me about any advice that would offer for somebody who wants to change directions.
Yeah. I think the biggest piece of advice I can offer for any career changer, not specific to UX, is just that doing some amount of self-audit on what it is you're looking for is really going to help direct you to the next thing. Instead of looking at careers, look at yourself first and get the careers to match you versus the other way around, which I think is incredibly different than how we talk about careers, even starting with kids at a really young age when we're asking them, like, what do you want to be? It's like, none of us know that. That's like that's a horrible question. It's a really challenging and it's imbued with a lot of anxiety. And for people who take that stuff really literally, it doesn't actually do much good for them. So know who you are, know what you're looking for, and find the careers that are going to match that. Specific to UX, though, I will say this, is that one of my most favorite things about UX is that we're all probably doing it on some level in our lives already. It's basically a framework for problem solving. So if you are identifying problems and defining them and understanding ways to potentially solution around that and testing those solutions, that's a really quick and dirty version of a UX process. So when I talk to potential GA students and they're like, well, I don't know if it's for me and I don't know if I'm going to be right for it, my first thing that I always say to them is, have you ever had a relationship with a human? And have you ever finished a project on time? Great. You probably have parts of the foundation that you already need to be successful in this field. It's just a matter of you really want to pursue it as meaningfully as those who end up in the industry. And to Bryce's point, like, UX is not just relegated to digital stuff. Like, we see it in our everyday lives across, the world. And there are applications beyond a computer or an iPhone in which the skills you learn around UX can be applied. So
wonderful.
Yeah.
I love hearing that. And Chad, so you started teaching yourself,
Yeah.
right? And you knew that this was the path you wanted to pursue. So somebody who's already got the rote knowledge, as opposed to just learning online, what skills did you get from GA specifically?
The skills that I got were communicating with others, because almost any software, you're going to have to interact with other people and learn how they look at code and review code, and also the processes that are involved. So I really wanted that classroom aspect. And GA really gave that to me. But also, my resume looked horrible before. Like, not what was on it, maybe a little bit what was on it, but also the way it was formatted and how to present yourself. Because the resume is the first, like, the best way to get your foot in the door, foot in the door of, like, an interview. And I knew that I wasn't going to be the best coder, but I could, as long as I could get that resume, I could get my foot in the door to the interview and then get the job, which, I mean, one interview, one job. So it worked out for me very well, and that's the way I look at it.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. This has been super informative. And I am thinking about maybe going for some classes myself. And as we learned in the last segment, one of the exciting things that you can do with General Assembly is you can go to any night course that they have for free. They offer some events that are completely free to see if this is something you really want to pursue. So again, thank you all so very much. Visit ga.co, that's ga.co, and learn more information. You can also click on the link below for more descriptions. So we appreciate it. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, you guys.
Thanks.
Thank
You
you.
too.